ThinkProgress.org, who was named by, what's this magazine? The Advocate, as one of its 40 under 40 voices in the LGBT community worth listening to, so I think we should listen. He's going to be talking about building a coalition of invisible identities. Not invisible people, but invisible identities. Invisible people are much more difficult to organize. So, Zack Ford.
So, I have like a bit of a superpower. If I want you to assume that I'm gay just from the sound of my voice, all that I have to do is raise the pitch, end each phrase going up like it's a question, widen my vowels, over-enunciate my consonants like my P's and my T's and my K's, and of course, lisp my L's and S's with abandon. If I want it to be really affected, I can add a few likes in your nose, you know? And if my wrist is just limp enough and my face is just ducky enough, even a deaf person can probably figure it out. I have a bit of a superpower. If I want you to assume that I'm gay just from the sound of my voice, all that I have to do is raise the pitch, end each phrase going up like it's a question, widen my vowels, over-enunciate my P's and T's and K's, and of course, lisp my L's and S's with abandon. If I want it to have really affected, I can of course add a few likes and you knows. And if my wrist is just limp enough and my face is just ducky enough, even a straight person can probably figure it out. Now, if you know nothing about me or the kind of work that I do, and you just didn't listen to that introduction, you might be a bit confused as to whether or not I'm gay. Don't worry, I won't leave that a mystery. I am. But this is my regular speaking voice. It's got a lower pitch. I sing bass in the choir. And it's got kind of a gravelly timbre. If I'm not projecting for a public speech, it even can kind of be a little mumbling like this. Not that I'm ever afraid to say exactly what I'm thinking. I always joke that all gay men have the voice at their disposal. It's just that some of us feel a little bit more naturally connected to it. But I have to admit that when I've had an alcoholic beverage or two, my own voice gets a little gayer. It comes out a little bit more. What's interesting about the gay voice is that it's not actually proof of sexual orientation. There are plenty of straight men who have a gay voice, and plenty of gay men who don't. It's not that we gay men actually tend to be more effeminate, so much as the fact that those of us who are more effeminate just feel freer to be more authentic about it, because we've already broken free of the patriarchy. Now, a lot of gay men look down on the gay voice and the other effeminate mannerisms that often go with it. And that reflects a lot of homophobia, both inwardly directed and outward to other people. And the fact that I sound gayer after I've had a few cocktails and I'm in the welcoming environment of a gay bar suggests that I might even be subconsciously trying to bury my gayness a little bit the rest of the time. Now, if the idea of the gay voice is interesting to you, you should check out the new documentary, Do I Sound Gay? It's not my movie, so I don't want to take too much credit for it. But I thought it was an interesting and fitting way to introduce my topic, which is the fun, complicated, invisible identities that we all have. These are aspects of ourselves that aren't necessarily visible to the naked eye, but play a significant role in terms of how we see the world. We can actually reveal them and actively let people know, as I was demonstrating at the top, or we can choose to keep them hidden in some other ways. If they aren't obvious, people can make a lot of assumptions about who we are and how we see the world and how we think about things. And then we have to employ various strategies to correct those assumptions over and over and over again, you know? Awareness and sensitivity about invisible identities is growing rapidly, though. That's why we're all here today, right? First, a century of research in psychology and sociology has helped us make sense of the fact that we have these invisible identities and how we understand more about how we actually interact with them. Secondly, and more importantly, the internet has had a profound impact. A lot of these invisible identities are not inherited. So we're everywhere. But the internet has helped us connect with other people and build community and provide support to each other. And as we feel more connected to each other and find others like us, we live more openly. And then other invisibles see us and benefit in the same way. And because we invisibles are everywhere, the visibility and understanding and thus acceptance spirals ever upward. As you may have heard, we gays, along with our lesbian and bisexual brethren, have been doing fairly well for ourselves in this regard. We're living our lives more openly. We can get married now everywhere and raise our families. We can live our lives more openly in the military without worrying about losing our job. Schools are becoming much safer places for young people, and they are in turn coming out earlier and earlier. And we're now frequently portrayed in the media without being tokenized or stereotyped. We're doing okay. It's getting better. And pretty quickly. June 26th was a special day. I am dreadfully single, but winning marriage equality was still, pretty compelling experience. 1 minute, you're just more equal than you were the minute before. But one of the most moving parts of the day, apart from the Obergefell decision itself, was hearing from old straight friends who reached out to congratulate me personally. These were people I hadn't talked to in years, people I worked in student government with or other college activities, people who I'd advocated for in a team in a totally different context or empowered in some way. And I guess they just learned something about me in the process. The fact that they cared enough to reach out to me, to express that they understood the significance of this victory and wanted to extend a congratulatory gesture of kindness, somehow made the day feel more powerful to me. It wasn't just a victory in something that I'd been fighting for. It was the fact that this victory was respected and shared by others. It was a victory for all of us. And a lot of people have wondered how we've had all these victories. How have we been so successful? And I think that's it right there. We started figuring out a long time, we being the gay movement, that if we stick our neck out for others, then they will stick out their necks for us too. And the best part is that we often help a lot of other people who struggle with invisible identities at the same time. So it's kind of a win-win, a synergy of mutual support. And then the wins actually feel better too, because we've got friends at our side. We've found amazing support, for example, from the labor community. Labor is probably not something you thought we would be talking about at SSACon. Now, your career is not necessarily a biological or inherent identity that you might experience like sexuality, but it still defines a lot of your life experience and perspective. And we, of course, know that labor has often been the victim of people with more privilege than them. So because we've stuck up for the unions have been some of our biggest advocates, dating back to the times of Harvey Milk. And thanks to the union support, we now have more than civil unions. I tweeted that there was a bad joke in here somewhere. Another group that we've built an incredible alliance with is the immigrant community. As recently as last week, leaders of LGBT organizations, true to their commitment to that alliance, have even been arrested as part of protests in favor of immigration reform. Now, immigration is not an issue that's explicitly LGBT, but there are certainly LGBT immigrants. And we also know that LGBT immigrants experience much more severe treatment in immigration detainment facilities. So it is, in a way, a shared fight, even though it's not obviously apparent. Moreover, the experience of being undocumented, having an identity that you have to hide from the rest of the world around you just for your safety and well-being, that's kind of a thing that we were able to find some common ground on. Now, we aren't always good at the ally thing. Ironically, the T in LGBT has been given short shrift for a long time. Even now, we still don't do as well by our transgender sisters and brothers and gender unaffiliated siblings, which is sad because their abuse stems from the exact same sexism that's hurting the gay community. But they are finally having their moment, maybe a decade past ours. Surely you've heard of Caitlyn Jenner. Maybe you didn't know she was an Olympic athlete back in the day, but you've heard of her. And you've probably heard of Laverne Cox and maybe Janet Mock and some other wonderful spokespeople who are out there. But these role models are still the exception to the rule for the trans community. Their strife is still real and it's very severe. Violence, unfortunately, is unabating. It's actually going up, or at least the reporting of it is going up, and particularly against trans women of color, which is sort of a sad reminder that even visible identities still have a lot of work ahead of them in terms of achieving equality. Trans people still face the same political injustice as the rest of the LGBT or LGB movement as well. We still don't have protections from discrimination in over half of the states. So the fact that our visibilities have both advanced and the fact that we've achieved some of the big milestone victories for the gay movement means that this is a great time for our two communities to finally support each other the way they always should have. Religious identity, which is probably something you've been waiting for me to mention, is also often invisible. I laugh when older LGBT activists tell me of a time when it was taboo for anyone in the LGBT community to identify as a person of faith. Now, the LGBT movement is significantly supported by faith groups, and there's even been a growing emphasis on helping people be both queer and religious, and helping them achieve change within unwelcoming denominations. This has actually made a huge difference for LGBT equality, because we've got a lot more people rooting for us. But it's actually forced a lot of us non-religious folks back into the atheist closet. I've been trying to do my own part to bring atheist visibility back into the LGBT community, and I've begun to find some wonderful partners from the secular movement. For example, at Creating Change, the big annual conference of the LGBT movement, we're making great strides in creating content that speaks specifically to the experience of atheists, and it's thanks to allies I found like SSA and the American Atheists and Center for Inquiry, and other brilliant outspoken folks like Greta and Marcia who are here with us, that we were making this kind of change. But what I quickly realized as I ventured down this road is that I also need to help bring LGBT visibility to the atheist movement and community, and that's what I'm doing here. I work in the LGBT movement. I live in the very gay city of Washington, D.C. I pretty much can be in a gay-dominated space most of the time. And I think it's fair to say that my gay identity is more salient to me than my atheist identity. Now, don't get me wrong, I can be a pretty outspoken atheist, but when I wake up in the morning, I think that my gay goggles filter my experience just a little bit more. So when I'm in an atheist space, even though I'm also an atheist, I actually feel really closeted as a gay man. I tried going to Sunday assembly once, and it was lovely, but I felt oddly disconnected from the others who were there. I felt like I needed to turn up my gay voice a little bit and remind my fellow non-believers how hetero and cis-normative their spaces can be. At times, the lack of queerness can be kind of boring. God, you straight people can be dull. And at other times, it can feel a little unwelcoming, like I really have to turn it off like a light switch to fit in. Now, not hostile, just unwelcoming. Being gay is part of my cultural identity. So as a gay man, I'm going to tend to feel more comfortable in spaces where that cultural perspective is proactively embraced. For me, I like a nice undercurrent of sexual revolution and interactions where assumptions are not automatically made about sexual orientation and gender identity. And there are subtle, easy ways to make a space feel more queer, even if the people in it are largely not. Ironically, this is something that a lot of inclusive churches have demonstrated, whether it's by active participation in pride celebrations or something as simple as wearing rainbows on their name tags at services every week. They go out of their way to recognize the diversity within and celebrate the diversity beyond the church walls, and their diversity grows as a result. Now, don't get me wrong, the reverse here is true. In LGBT activism spaces where defending inclusive faiths as legitimate has become kind of the status quo, it's really obnoxious, I also start to feel invisible as an atheist. I make the opposite point that I'm making here when I'm there, but I can't help but notice how straight my atheist voice sounds when I do. I don't think I've ever met an anti-LGBT atheist. That wouldn't last very long if I actually talked to them. In a way, our two groups share a common enemy, religious dogma, so it's a natural partnership. But even though I see LGBT-friendly atheists all the time, and even though there are some incredible role models of queer atheists working mostly on the atheist side, I'm not sure the movement has fully latched onto the idea of what it means to be an ally. And not just to the LGBT community, but generally to communities and issues outside the specific experience of nonbelievers. I'm not sure that as a movement, with our own alphabet soup of atheists and agnostics and humanists and otherwise secular folks, we've embraced the great potential and benefits behind that kind of allyship, to be the kind of people like my friends who see victory in other people's victories. And I think it's time that we gave that more of a try. Are there more that atheists should be advocating for? Is this a movement that's just about opposing religious oppression and promoting science? Or are we, with our own experience at having invisible identities that are oppressed, able to achieve much more and support many more people? What should our visibility look like? What should our role in society and culture look like? What would it look like if the secular movement regularly stuck its neck out for immigration reform, for teacher pay, for healthcare equality, for gun violence prevention, and not just when religion is somehow involved in the conversation, all the time? Who are the groups who might not share our secular identity specifically, but who could find common cause with us on specific issues and then stick up for us in return? And here's the toughest question, and I'm not the first person to ask it today, but here's the toughest question I want to leave you with. To what extent should we be willing to work with people who are religious, even evangelical? If we agree with them on an issue, even if their position is motivated by their religious beliefs, does that necessarily mean we're endorsing their religious beliefs? I would argue that by finding common causes with our religious brethren, we can make the world a better place, educate others, and even help find a few other folks who are ready to hear our message, or have just been hiding in the closet and need a little affirmation to come on out and join us. We can and should still criticize religious belief all we want. It's really fun. And as far as I'm concerned, for as much as they claim disrespect when we're all blasphemous, nothing we say really ever sounds as bad as "you're going to hell for eternity." But I think we'd be foolish, or at least a bit naive, to ignore the fact that we're always going to live in a world with a lot of religious people. It's nice to imagine one that is all atheist, but, you know, then we have that fight about what we call ourselves, and that doesn't go well. But all those religious people out there are not all actively oppressing us. And some of them just haven't learned how to be our allies. They haven't met us. They haven't talked to us. They haven't seen a lot of great portrayals of us where we're not Dr. House who's really mean, or the good wife who just doesn't know how to talk about her atheist identity and hasn't thought about it enough that her own daughter confuses her. You know, the character portrayals are still growing, and we need to do that in real life too. If religious people can learn how to be allies to us icky gays, I bet some of them have room in their hearts for us rowdy atheists too. The trick behind building these kinds of alliances is recognizing our own intersections. A movement like ours that's new tends to start by addressing issues that impact all of its members. So in our case, government-endorsed religion, intelligent design, climate change denial. But as it grows and succeeds, a movement can begin to focus on issues that impact any of its members. In doing so, it thinks outside itself. It embraces the interplay of culture and takes its seat at the table of society. Now, gay identity is my perspective, and as I've admitted, it's the one that really dominates my perspective. But it's not the only identity that we have to work on. I'm a cisgender, middle-class white man, and there are countless experiences I can't speak for. What are we going to do to make sure that our community reflects that broad diversity of perspectives? What can we do to make it a space for women and people of color and people with disabilities and LGBT people, and more importantly, the people who live at the intersections of multiple forms of identities like that, and even just multiple diverse experiences in life? How can we make them all feel like this is a movement that they have equal access and ownership of? if we start to intentionally advocate for them, show them that we stand at their side, they will stand at ours too. And that's the little seed of a message that I wanted to leave with you guys today. Keep an eye out, or an ear out, for those invisible identities out there. There may be others trying to find their voice who are ready to lend it to our cause. And they probably deserve to hear ours. If we can find the courage to speak out in an atheist voice, however that might sound, blasphemy, 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 even when we don't think we have anything to gain personally from it, we might be very surprised by the results. Thank you.